Welcome to Babin's Bees. Today is November the 7th and it's about 14 degrees. Perfect temperature for checking that hive perhaps one last time before winter. In the previous video, you would recall that we took some resource from our TopBar hives and then converted that to some Lang frames in the hopes that we'd be able to have enough of a big enough colony to be able to go into winter. Well, as luck has had it and as time has evolved throughout the summer, we're able to be down to two Lang hives, which is great. They're 8 frame deeps each, and so we're going to go through one today to take a peek and see what we can see. Are they ready? Do they have enough food to last for the winter? So fingers crossed that they do. And again, this is a bit of an experiment. I've only had TopBar hives and now we wanted to try some Langs just so we'd be able to compare between the two styles. So let's open up the hive. So throughout the summer, I did have two 8 frame deeps in the hopes that they'd build out enough wax, and they really didn't. And throughout the summer, instead of just relying on that wax that we had converted into frames from our TopBar hive, I did purchase some foundation just to help so that we could build out that wax. And again, the goal was to get them ready for winter. So let's take a peek and see what we can see. This, of course, is a nice frame full of honey, and then we also see that there's some pollen in there too, which is great. So as the queen lays, they'll have the good resource to be able to raise those new bees, which is fabulous. So I see lots of pollen. I see lots of good honey stored here. This is all honey in there. There's some nice pollen. Move the bees out of the way a little bit. You might be able to see in there orange and yellows, which is great. Just checking to make sure the queen isn't on this one. I don't see her there. And I'll just set this one aside just to give me the room to be able to keep moving through. There was also a little bit of deformed wing virus in this Langstroth hive, so I'm also taking a look there to see how that's doing. Of course, we've treated for mites in the hopes of reducing the spread of virus. You definitely got to stay on top of those mites. So this is a really nice frame as well. So you can see this frame is with some wax foundation that I did purchase. So right here, and put in the hives, but they've built all that wax. You can see the honey, still some nectar in there, which is great. But this is a really nice frame for them for the winter. And on the opposite side, there's a good amount of pollen there too. We'll show you that one too. So you can see some nice bright orange colors there. So of course we know pollen to be their protein, so they need that to make, well actually this pollen is now really bee bread because it's pollen that's brought in, mixed in with some of the nectar, and then they pack it and they store it away for when they need it. And it's called bee bread once it's in that state, or stage I should say. And again, it is food for them. So that looks good. Going back to this frame that I set aside, I just wanted to make note that this is from wax that we took from a TopBar hive. We kind of fixed it in with some fishing line, and then the bees drew out all the rest. So you can see that's pretty neat. But the rest of the frames in this hive are pretty much all foundation that I purchased. And again, it's really a matter of preference on what you would like to have as the beekeeper. Again, my goal was to make sure that they'd be ready for winter. And I knew they wouldn't have had enough resource just with the TopBar wax. So we did go ahead and purchase some foundation. So in here, we're getting into the brood now. I'm not sure if you can see, but in there, there is a little egg in there. Those little white dots that kind of look like little grains of rice. That's where the queen would have laid some eggs, hoping the camera is picking that up. Just looking quickly for the queen. See if I see her. And I don't. And what also I don't see is any deformed wing virus yet, which is great. That's fabulous. Certainly hoping that the mite treatments has helped to stop that spread. We know that, of course, it's not the mites that create that virus, but they do pass it on. And of course, if your hive is overloaded with mites, then it reduces the immune system of your bees, so harder for them to fight those viruses. Mite treatment is essential, or I feel it is anyhow. And I know there's varying opinions on that, but certainly we do treat our hives to help reduce the mite loads. So we're back and we're still in the brood nest. So we're in the center of the deep right now. Of course, all here on the side is honey, packed honey, capped honey, and in the middle we do see some brood, capped brood there in the middle as well, which is great. Look on the other side. We see pretty much the same thing on this side as well. On the flip side, in the middle, you'll see your capped brood, and then on the outer edges is where you see your capped honey, which is great. And I see egg there, and I see some larvae, or larvae, I guess. We see in the middle there, again, you might see the egg, which looks like those little grains of rice. But then hopefully you're able to see the larvae as well. This hive is really thriving, which is exciting and excellent. Of course, winter is always a test for the bees to see how they fare. Ventilation for humidity is incredibly important in your hive. So we make sure there's some vents, screen vents, to ensure that that moisture can escape from the top. Oftentimes it's not the cold of the winter that kills your bees, but it's that moisture. It's not the cold, it's the moisture. So you want to make sure there's a vent hole for them, for that moisture to be able to escape. So again, here now we're past the brood nest. So the middle of the box, of course, is more the brood nest. Here what we're seeing up top is some capped honey, and then in the center is still some uncapped nectar. More than likely thick enough to be called honey at this point, but it's still not capped yet, but that's still food for them, which is great. Just a couple of more frames to go through. And again, we're seeing the same thing there, seeing the same thing on the other side as well. Top part, bottom to you now, however, is the capped honey. And then we do see some nectar in there. Still shines quite a bit. Not sure if you can see it if we come a bit closer. And then this being the last frame. So they drew out all this wax on the foundation, which is pretty impressive. Same thing on the other side. A lot of empty cells here, but there is some nectar in there as well, which they'll have as their food. So again, this is an eight frame deep, and this is what we're going to overwinter in. Going to make sure there's a mouse guard there. Sometimes those field mice like to try to go where it's warm, so we want to make sure that there's no ability for them to do that. And then I may also wrap the hive with some tar paper, but not to restrict that vent for the moisture, but really just more as a barrier to the wind. And again, kind of like us humans, you know, if you're well dressed for the cold weather, you'll be okay. But if you're wet, if you're damp and it's cold, then that's when, of course, it's dangerous, right? Hypothermia sets in. It's same for the bees. Bees can manage very cold temperatures, but if there's moisture, if they're damp, if they're wet, and there's some wind blowing in on them, they're going to die. So it is really important to make sure that you have a vent hole to make sure that moisture can be vented out. But this hive looks good. I think it's ready for the winter. Again, we'll just do a couple of prep things to block some of that wind for them, to help them along. And hopefully this spring, this hive will still be viable and it'll grow from there. And we'll certainly check in then. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you in the next video.